of Philippine-China relation and the foreign policy of the current administration, particularly its China policy. The President's successful visit to Beijing was actually preceded by the Ramos mission. This is the mission of the former President, Fidel Ramos, to Hong Kong when he met with the Vice Chairman, or rather the Chairperson of the National People's Congress Foreign Relations Committee, Fu Ying, and former Ambassador to the Philippines, Fu Ying, and Professor Wu Shih-chun, who is the head of the National Research Institute on South China Sea Studies. So the talks in August in Hong Kong was actually the icebreaker mission and prepared the groundwork which led to the summit meeting between President Duterte and President Xi Jinping. Now, we've all heard about the China pivot of the Philippines and the new foreign policy. What basically does it consist of? The shift in Philippine foreign policy is basically from a tight alignment, a close alignment with the US in the past previous years against China. You know, it was misunderstood in China as a containment policy against China, but somehow, the Philippines was viewed as a spearhead of this anti-China coalition. Now, it has shifted now to seeking better political and economic ties with China, but not seeking a military alliance. At best, it would be an alliance of trade and commerce. Essentially, what the Philippines is doing, and this is based, I mean, for you who study international politics, you're aware of this. If you have a strategic triangle, basically before, we were aligned closely to one side, the US. And if China is here, what we're doing is not a swing all the way to China and a tight alignment with China. No, because we still remain in the alliance with the US. What we're doing is a separation, degrees of separation of foreign policy from the US and the assertion of an independent foreign policy. Scholars of international relations call this the hedging strategy. You try to find your way somewhere between the two, the rising power and the dominant power. And you do it because you don't know in the next 3 years. Well, when it happened, we didn't know who the President of the United States would be. Now it's Donald Trump. And we don't know what he's going to do. So you hedge because he may just abandon the alliance. But the point is that you hedge your bets because you don't know between the two powers who will be able to sustain its position in the region. There is the rising trajectory of China and the declining trajectory of the US. So it makes sense that you improve relations with China to maximize the gains for the Philippines. The starting point here is Philippine national interest, to be able to seek tangible gains for the welfare of the people, but also to improve relations with our big neighbor and to be able to develop friendship, to restore the traditional friendship with the Chinese people, and to promote regional peace and stability. So, essentially, the President's China policy, the focus and the key driver of Philippines-China relations under the President Duterte will be economic, trade and finance. Economic cooperation, not disputes, will drive Philippines-China relations. The disputes will not disappear overnight, but there will be direct talks, bilateral talks, to resolve them peacefully. But the disputes should not be and will not be an obstacle to the development of bilateral ties. So you could look at it as a two-track approach. The key word is separation, delinking, compartmentalization. The non-contentious issues should be delinked, should be separated. and compartmentalize from the contentious issues. The dispute should not be at the front and center of the relations, as was the case, wittingly or unwittingly in the past. In the case of non-contentious issues like economic cooperation, finance, trade, culture, education, and sports, there is no problem in developing this so we can move fast, and that's what we're doing now, moving fast with economic cooperation, promotion of cultural exchange, sports, restoring this, as well as dialogues between the different government departments which were frozen since 2013, since 2012. So it's basically normalizing again the relations, but it doesn't mean we give up on the disputes. The disputes, the contentious issues, we compartmentalize and we continue to discuss them one by one with the use of quiet diplomacy and not megaphone diplomacy. So, the result of this though is the benefit in terms of perception on both sides. From the Philippine side, China is not viewed as the national security threat, but is now viewed as an economic partner in development. From the Chinese side, including the Chinese media, the social media, the Philippines will no longer be viewed as the geopolitical pawn and the Trojan horse of the US containment policy, but rather as a friendly neighbor that is acting independently of the US. So the economic gains are what will drive this relationship. There were 13 MOUs signed during the visit. These are still at the level of memorandum of understanding, letters of intent, but it totals like $24 billion in loans and investment projects, consisting of $9 billion in loans and $15 billion in investment project, predominantly in roads, infrastructure, railway, etc. And an estimated 2 million jobs to be generated over the next 5 years. Of course, the Philippines has its own not so positive experience in dealing with China in the past, particularly during the time of a previous administration before the last one. This was the North Rail project, the Joint Maritime Seismic Undertaking, the NBN ZTE project, which were all, well, JMSU was lapsed after 3 years. The other two were either cancelled in the beginning or finally in the middle of it. But the basic problem there was the lack of transparency, the lack of due diligence, no bidding process, violations of government procurement rules. This precisely is what we should avoid as we move forward and we move fast with economic cooperation. Moreover, there are certain limits the Philippines will have to observe because of the Constitution. When it comes to joint exploration, we can pursue, we can discuss, but there is the limit in the Constitution regarding the preservation of the national patrimony and the 60-40 rule, that 60% should be made up of Philippine capital and 40% foreign capital in any joint venture. So, to conclude, what are the challenges ahead? What are the risks and what are the opportunities? It's how to carry out economic cooperation on mutually beneficial terms, because this is how we will advance our relations and avoid the mistakes of the past. On the question of the disputes, how to conduct negotiations on territorial and jurisdictional disputes without, on our part, giving up on our sovereignty claim. And we should expect the same on China's part. And lastly, as we move and try to diversify our economic and political ties, how to avoid economic dependence on either the US and China. Thank you very much for your interest.